Here we are. You remember these people?
I do remember these people.
I was actually asking Helen, but if I ask a question, whoever answers at least lets me know that I'm visible. Yeah, because I have this psychological problem of invisibility.
You have a psychological problem of invisibility?
Yeah.
I have a dialogue that we could work on together.
Tell me more. Is there more to that?
I am not talking about it.
Okay.
I want to stay invisible. Anyway,
Okay.
hi.
Well,
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome back to my show. I'll be leading this a little bit because this is my show. And welcome, Helen, for the first time. It's really lovely to have you here this time. And for us to do it all together, I wanted Doug to be here since obviously we have experienced your work together. I thought that this would be a great way to share the message that you guys have to offer people in imagotherapy and the hope that I think a lot of couples look for, which is, I'm having all these problems. I've tried therapy before and it hasn't worked. What is different about this? Now, if you're listening to this on my podcast, you are probably already aware of imagotherapy. But just for those of you that are watching for the first time or listening for the first time, I'd love the two of you to discuss the difference between traditional relationship therapy and imagotherapy.
Okay. You want us to talk about that?
I would love you to talk about that.
How about if I start?
Why don't you start?
I'm so excited. We have been interviewed so many times. Nobody has ever asked that question as the first question. And I would say 99% have never asked that question
Right.
in the way you just asked it.
Yeah.
The way, and I know the answer, the way it is different, because I was the one that pointed out to Harville when we were on our first apartment in New York, 940 Park. We had just married the year we married. And I said, wow, Harville, do you understand what you're doing? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, that you have insisted that the therapist works with the couple. And the therapist doesn't work with the individuals that are having marital problems. An imagotherapist must work with the couple. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, do you understand you have taken the power away from the therapist to solve the couple's problems? And he said, yeah. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you make sure that the couples are telling each other what their problems are instead of the couple telling the therapist what the problems are and the therapist has the answer. I said, you make sure that the couples figure out the answers to their problems. You're democratizing therapy. You're wresting the power away from the therapist and putting the power into the couple. Like all the therapist is a coach, having the couples tell each other what is the problem and what is the solution. And I thought, I am married to the most brilliant guy in the world. And he said, yeah, I hadn't realized that quite exactly. So that's how I would answer that question. Sorry to be a little wordy.
No, you weren't wordy at all. Harville, do you have a different answer or additional information?
Well, not different, but I can add some more historical data about how it all started was with Helen, actually about a decade earlier, when we were just beginning to see each other. I don't think we were actually dating. It was more like relating regularly and sometimes dating. But anyway,
I was wishing you were dating me.
Wishing I was dating.
I thought they were sort of dates.
You thought they were dates. Yeah. But at any rate, we were in Helen's living room in Dallas, interestingly, where we moved back to, and having our a typical fight, which we started having, I think on our first date, we had a fight about the restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I still remember that restaurant. Bad choice. And Helen sort of shouted, stop, one of us talk, and the other one listen and take turns, like kindergarten. And so that actually, I guess we were sane enough for both of us to have a prefrontal cortex response to that. And we did calm down and were able then to continue the conversation by alternating. And that was the source of dialogue, where that aroused this was before we had invented dialogue as a therapeutic intervention. Once we got that invented, we realized that is the only therapeutic intervention couples need, is they need to have to be coached, as you said, through having conversations so they can talk about their differences without polarizing. If they can do that, then amazingly their problems go away, because the problem was an inability to talk without polarizing. So I would say that the other thing that makes it distinct from other therapies is that dialogue is all Imago therapists do, unless they're trying to integrate some other therapy into the system. And what that does is, as Helen said, it moves it away from therapist-dependent therapy to the couple being the center.
And the last two sentences. So Harville said one day, you know what we're doing? We're treating the relationship. We're not treating the two people in the relationship. We're teaching a couple to steward their relationship in a different way. Mm-hmm. So we're shifting the locus of healing from the two individuals in the relationship to the space between the relationship. So we're revolutionizing the mental health field, actually.
That was one of the things that
so one other sentence, and when you change the space between, you change the internal space within. Mm-hmm. And so that things come from the outside in, whereas traditional therapy models are everything is inside and you have to get it out. And we find that actually doesn't work very well. With therapy rate is still now, success rate is still just 40%. But we find when we work with the interactive space instead of the intrapsychic space, we get about 80 to 90% success rate.
That was one of the things that I really thought was very unique about the therapy, was that working on the space between, when we were in the workshop and talking about communication. And Helen, you just said it very, very eloquently. It was, you're treating the relationship, you're not treating the specific individual. And it's not, the therapist actually acts more like I don't know if a mediator, if that's the right word here, but almost like a sounding board or a referee to this conversation that's going on between the couple in a relationship. So yeah, that space between is the key element, I think.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys haven't necessarily had the time to go back. I know you get interviewed so much. I had done an episode on Imago therapy years and years ago, before you and I had the first conversation, Harville, last year. And it is, as I've said in the video that we recorded for you guys as a testimonial to the weekend, it is the only relationship therapy that I tell people to do, for the very reason of the taking it out of the sort of top level blame game, looking at certain things as, well, he did this and she did that, and creating a safe space. And what I do appreciate about Imago therapy, besides the couples dialogue, is that fact, is that you said that, because I've been in therapy many times where I don't agree with the therapist, and I'll tell you that the therapist has been wrong. So, and it's because they'll have sort of their, like a doctor looking for different habits and patterns than wanting to put me in a hole and pigeonhole me into this diagnosis. There are times where I'm like, no, that's not right. And they're like, oh, but I'm like, okay, I'll try it on, but I don't really feel like that's the right answer. So in this case, it's the empowerment of the couple, the empowerment of the individual. And that's why most people don't like to go to therapy, because they feel like they're going to be diagnosed. They feel like they're going to be labeled. They feel like they're going to be disempowered or put on medication or told that they're broken. And Imago therapy doesn't do any of that, which is another reason why I have even recommended and had people in my workshops go through some of the exercises by themselves, because I think there's value in being able to even just do the creating your imago exercise on your own to have a new relationship with relationships and with some of those core childhood wounds that we're trying to heal through choosing our love partners.
Yeah. Helen, it reminds me about what you're just saying about going and the therapist labeled you and all that sort of stuff. You remember when we were in trouble many years ago, about now 20 something years ago, and went to therapists in New York, we left them all because they did that. They put us in containers. In fact, the last one, one of your famous public statements is that we were diagnosed as the couple from hell. And so, once you put somebody in a box and put a sticker on that says narcissistic borderline couple, you can't wash that out. That's a permanent stain for their own minds. They think, oh, I'm a borderline. And when you're borderline, you've got these traits, and the more you focus on them, the more of them you get. So you become convinced that you are that. And therefore, the label increases the pathology. So you have to delabel everything and just look at how they're interacting and help them change the interaction so that they feel safe enough to actually be vulnerable and connect. And then they can communicate about their differences.
I love that you just said that, and we're having this conversation because that is another reason why I'm not a fan of traditional therapy. I do love certain therapeutic techniques like EMDR and hypnosis, but I'm not a fan of labeling and treating through medication somebody who's got. So as an example, I was reading your newsletter today about, and I know Harville, you and I talked about this last year because I asked you what your sign was. And I know you're a Virgo, and Helen, I know you're a Taurus. And so you're an Aquarius?
February.
Oh, yeah. You told me she was a Taurus.
Oh.
Or you thought she was a Taurus. You're Aquarius?
I don't know anything about astrology.
And those two astrological signs don't get along. I don't know if you know that, but I looked it up.
No, I never noticed that at all.
But, I can show you the passages
we just
in the book.
flow
they're
together
the
like fish in a stream.
Two most unlikely to have successful relationships.
Yeah.
Aquarius.
And I do a lot of astrology. Aquarius is air. It's thinking, it's uncontainable. Virgo, you're very linear and follow the rules and straight line and doing things right and being a perfectionist. Sometimes that's the top level stuff of your. Interesting. It changes a whole thing for me because Harville and I talked about it and he thought you were a Taurus. I'm like, oh, she's a Taurus. So, okay.
I'm the water. Aquarius.
Or in quantum mechanics, you're the wave. Yeah. I'm the particle.
I want to talk about quantum mechanics. Thank you for bringing that up because we touched upon it when we talked last year and you mentioned it and had it in the Imago workshop. For those of you that are listening that haven't heard me and Doug talk about the workshop yet, we've been to Getting the Love You Want couples workshop with Harville and Helen in Esalen, and they're doing, I believe, at least 6 more this year or 5 more this year, 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if you want to know more about that, you're going to go to harvillandhelen.com and it'll be in the show notes and we'll repeat that later. And there's a section where it tells you where they're going to be, what the workshop next for them is going to be. And we definitely encourage you to attend. And also to get the newest copy of Getting the Love You Want. It's the 30th anniversary edition and it has some new things in it from them. But I want to backtrack because I'm all about quantum physics and quantum mechanics. So in terms of law of attraction, vibration, and frequency, and you brought it up in the workshop, but I don't know how you're using it. How do you integrate quantum physics into imago therapy?
Wow.
Why don't I say a few things?
Why don't you say a few things?
Yes. Well, the concept of entanglement that in the quantum world, some people may think that something is a singularity, but that singularity is actually entangled with something else and they are opposites. And when one of them shifts, the other shifts the other way. And when the other shifts the other way, the other reshifts. And anyway, there's a dynamic that I think is called something like quirky action from a distance. Spooky action. I think Einstein said that.
Yeah.
And plus, there's a real sense of the observer effect, that what you look at and the way you look at impacts what the reality of the thing is. So I'll get that as a way to start.
Well, and just to add to that piece, it's a phenomenon we saw before we began to look at quantum mechanics, but didn't quite understand, which is that the way you look at someone not only determines what you see, but it influences how they show up for you. In other words, you create a response, and then you object to the response that you created, not knowing you created the response. Like when your partner's upset, you've constellated that with your partner, not knowing that, but you've been negative in some way. And then when they're negative back, then you are critical of them being negative, but that you constellated it. So it has something to do with that double slit experiment, in which when the observers of that double slit experiment, which is a photon being shot at a template that has two slits in it and has a screen in the back, that if you shoot a photon through those slits and don't observe it, it'll show up as a wave. If you shoot a photon through the slits and do observe it, it'll show up as a particle. And so that's where the observer effect comes from, is how you look at, or even the act of looking, constellates and reaction in what you look at and who you look at. And I was thinking, the other day, I was thinking about, we used to have a dog, and you could look at this dog a certain way and the dog would wag its tail. But if you looked a little bit sort of frown, dog would just go. And it's like, well, you could, and I remember doing this with Bertha, that she was so tuned into us that I could actually get her to do a little dance, and all I did was sort of change whether I smiled or frowned at her. And at the time I didn't think this is the quantum field working. It was like, Bertha is really interesting. She's so sensitive and tuned in. But the core thing that we do is we have for years been working on what we call the relational paradigm, which is a way to reframe experience from experience being something that happens inside people. And the individual model on which therapy was built by Freud in the in the 19th century, where the self was the center of reality. We've been shifting that to relationship, and that was a conversation begun by a lot of us. When Carl Rogers in 1950 said, hey, maybe empathy, which is a relational transaction, is what cures instead of insight, which is an internal sort of thing. We're talking about that, and Helen and I joined that conversation because we were aware that with couples, as Helen said earlier, it's not what's inside couples that matters, it's what's between them that matters. So we began to understand relationship as primary and the self as secondary. But the more we enlarged that and finally moved to relationship as the ground and the individual is a derivative, it's like we're just making this stuff up as a result of our clinical observations, and then we theorize and build theory, and we were just adding to the relational ambience of the self. But we still had a self that was relational rather than relationship in which the self was a derivative. And so one day it hit us, because we've been playing around with quantum physics, and it's like the obvious suddenly shows up in front of you, which is that quantum physics is a science in which one can ground connecting. If connecting is what human beings crave and what they do, and we are social creatures, psychology actually doesn't have any resources to discuss connecting and relating. It has all its resources to discuss internal processes, thinking, feeling, acting, and so forth. So we go to quantum mechanics and we find, well, in quantum mechanics, the fundamental assumption is that we live in an interconnecting, interacting universe. And if you add to that, this interacting, interconnecting universe has some semblance of what we would call proto-awareness at the level of the atom or the quantum, every quantum body object, so that we live in an interacting, living universe, sentient universe, which its interaction with us, and we are not interacting with it, we are it. It's located where we are. We're like, we constitute it, and it is constituted in us. So we find this really helps us understand the yearning to be in connection is because it is our nature. Connecting is, and we call it connecting is being, and being is connecting. And that's not something you're doing. It's simply, it's not an action you're taking. It's a reality that's happening. And what then we began to understand from the quantum field why, when connecting is ruptured, it feels so terrible. And it's because we lose our connection to the universe itself when we lose connection with our local partner. So the local is the door to the cosmic, but you can't go to the cosmic and get back to connecting. You have to go back to the local to get reconnected to the cosmos. So then we began to understand that's what couples therapy is about. It's about reconnecting locally, Helen and me, flowing together. And then that is the link to our actual reality of belonging and experiencing the universe. And when we feel that connecting, we say, boy, that produces a sensation when I'm experiencing connecting with Helen and through her, the universe itself as a connecting universe. It triggers a sensation called full aliveness. I really feel alive because I'm now in the flow of the pulsation of being, and I feel alive. And that's a sensation. It's not a feeling. It's like it goes through your neurology, but it doesn't come from your neurology. It comes from the quality of the space between. And then it's accompanied by an emotion called joy. So we finally arrived at the point that reality, we need to talk about full aliveness is the nature of human beings. That is their nature. And when they don't feel fully alive, something's wrong. And that joy is their primary emotion. When you're not feeling joy, something is wrong. And so what's wrong? You're disconnected from your primary human contacts. In marriage, from your partner, or you could be disconnected from your children or from your friends. Wherever human disconnection occurs, it has a ripple effect on your connection with the background, which is the universe itself. So that's the fundamental idea that we operate out of. And so we build what we would call psychological models on top of the quantum view of the universe, and kind of reframing human beings and human interaction through the science of quantum physics. And we find that this is, don't notice one day, this is appropriate because psychotherapy was based on Newtonian physics, in which Newton said everything is made of hard, unbreakable, separate particles. And that became the model for the social self in the 18th century. And that self became the model for Freud, who took this self that was unbreakable, unchangeable, and inserted in it for the first time a subjectivity called id, ego, and superego. So that experience was how these three structures interact with each other. And if they go wrong, you go inside and try to fix their interaction by changing memory, by remembering experiences, free association. But everything is an internal exploration. And so that model was built on Newton. So most psychologists don't know that psychology is rooted in physics. But it broke off. Philosophy was rooted in physics. Psychology broke off from philosophy in the 18th century. So what we're doing is simply, we think of progression that we've only become aware of. We have a new science that actually accounts for experience better than Newton did and better than Freud did. It's a new science called the quantum field, which says everything is connecting and you are part of everything. And when you're in the flow, you feel great. When you're not experiencing the flow, you can never lose. You lose your connection with the universe, but you can lose awareness that you're connected. When you lose that awareness because somebody's triggered you with negativity and you go to anxiety, then you feel miserable and you got to get it back. So that's sort of a little short mini lecture on how we use the quantum field for our understanding of couplehood.
Well, that's awesome. And I appreciate the explanation. I use a lot of law of attraction, quantum physics. It is physics. Vibration and frequency are real, and they also are emotions, and they are energy. But this may sound like I'm not challenging you. I want to take this to another level, because if I'm listening to this and I am in 100% agreement, I'm on board with you 100%, for the reason that you're focused on utilizing what you have tangible here in order to connect and feel connected, which of course reminds you you're connected to all. However, I do believe that there's another option. I'm not saying as in a replacement, but let's say I'm single. If I'm single and I don't have this opportunity to create this space between in an intimate way, to me, and I think you're going to agree with me because I'm looking at this, right? And there's this idea that we have that source energy, or the universe, or right, the quantum field, if you will, if we can be in relationship with source or creator or God or the quantum field, to remind ourselves that we're not alone and connect in a less physical but more vibrationally expansive way, I still think that there's value in, well, more than value, but because I teeter on wanting to make sure that people can understand the difference between ever becoming a victim to your relationship, or victim to your partner, or victim to not getting what you want, and therefore it's your job to make me happy, versus we're going to work on our relationship. We're going to keep it with a sacred space. But I also still, as an individual, have a sacred connection and a sacred opportunity, because he can't think for me. I can't think for him. I can't feel for him. Right. So how would you deal with the question about the relationship when you're not in with your connection to source, with joy, with God, Christ, whoever you want to say that being or that energy is, when you're not in a relationship and you're still searching for? Because I connected to that years ago and got into such a wonderful state of appreciation of my life that I attracted at the time a partner, but I didn't need him to complete me in a happiness kind of way. I was already vibrating. I was already joyful, full of freedom, full of love, full of expansion. And then that relationship then got to take me on the next level of my journey, to grow, to learn, to be challenged, to have opportunity to learn about relationship that I didn't before. And I became better because of it. And it's led me here in attracting the next level of where I want to go. So the question is about someone who's single, how they can take this information that you're using and apply it to them and still feel connected without somebody that they're utilizing as a human source of feeling joy and connection.
So in the service of time, I'll make a response and not mirror you. Is that okay?
Please. Yes, fine. Yes, fine.
It's so wonderful, and I'd like to mirror it. But from what I think I hear you say, Harville and I actually have two different answers. Yes. So I'll start with my answer. And my answer resonates with yours, JJ, that there's a field out there, and that field, the source, can be, you can have, that it's a relational universe. And you're an instance of the universe. Couplehood is an instance of the universe in that it relates. But if there's not a person, there's also, or if whether there's a person there or not, there's also relating to the source. And because I'm more of the wave in our particle wave duality, I intuit that what you're saying is very true. That there's a lot you can derive from the relationship with the source itself of any religion or nature, just receiving strength from the wonder, experiencing the wonder of life. But Harville might have another answer.
Well, I think it's a controversial question, and that I have a
last
controversial
thing,
answer.
Because some people are intuitive knowers and some people are rational, linear knowers, and both of those are great, but they perceive different levels of things. And I can't be the brilliant theorist that Harville is, because he can make everything so linear and can create a theory of things, but I can intuit things that and experience them that he doesn't experience. And so there's a book called it's a feminist epistemology book about separate and connected knowing. There are two ways to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our answers may come from our different ways of knowing. And so I am working on it this way, that the question of singles is that there's no such thing as a single. And that's only a construct that culture has created out of the other construct, which is the self, which was constructed in out of Newtonian physics by psychology, and then used as a psychotherapy model by Freud. But there's no such thing as a self. There's no thinginess. That the self is the oscillation between self and other, or the self is what is the awareness of the oscillation between Helen and me, of the space between. So that the self is not locatable. The self is a process of interaction with another a location, another quantum object or person or whatever. Could be with a dog or whatever, but there's an oscillation. And that that it has to be a paradigm purity, or it's two colliding paradigms. And the paradigm purity would say that you cannot connect with source except through the local. And that means you can, and this is why so many singles are turned to sometimes what I would call substitutes, which is meditation or travel or drugs or spirituality or you name it, as a substitute and compensation for their loneliness in relationship to other people. But the practice of relating to the source doesn't give them relational skills so that they can actually relate to the conduit of the source, which is the quality of their relationship to another person. It's like there are two. You need this contact. It's like an electricity. You need the plug and the plug and the socket. Mm-hmm. That produces the electricity, and this plug never gets electricity by itself. There is no by itself. There's always connecting and loss of that awareness. And so from my view, you can't get there. You can't get to God directly. Even if Luther said so, that God is the interaction with the other. The source is experienced. The relationship is the conduit of the source. Like Buber says, the hyphen between the I and the thou is God is in that hyphen, and you can't experience the hyphen without the thou. So that's my intellectual construct, that human relationships of whatever sort with a significant other is the conduit of the energy of the quantum energy field, and that you can't get there on your own ladder up there.
So would you then say that someone who's single could not experience the joy or connectedness of someone who is in a relationship?
Right.
And again,
that's why they're lonely, and why we have an epidemic of loneliness, right? Even with people in relationships, because they're not interacting with their partner in such a way that the energy is coherent. They're interacting negatively, so the energy is incoherent. Even people who are married but we have an epidemic of loneliness now, and a substitute trying to deal with connection through social media, through texting, through, all the ways that are replacing face-to-face stuff. But I think that that's an indicator of how much we need connecting, is how much we use the phone and texting and all the other new ways of communicating. That those are symptoms of the missing piece, which is the personal. And the phones are going to be around for a long time, but I don't think the need to be in relationship will ever go away. And we'll have to find ways beyond technology or the use of technology to help restore the personal. Anyway, that's my case and my argument.
No, it spans, and both of you gave a good, I appreciate the way you set that up, Helen, because, it is how we interpret information. And sometimes we can be saying the same thing in different ways. Sometimes we can disagree, but still have places in where we connect and have a sort of resonance of, oh yeah, no, I think that too, but maybe it's different in my mind how it happens. But I appreciate that. Doug, you wanted to ask a question?
I was just going to say, in today's day and age, when everybody has more friends than ever on Facebook, people are lonelier than ever between social media and all of the connections that they have. It's amazing that they still feel separated, but it's the reality of where we are today, is that people are totally isolated. They're alone, even with thousands and thousands of connections and influencers and LinkedIn. I mean, no matter where you are on social media, everybody has this amazing amount of connections, yet a lack of real connections in relationship.
Yeah, and I think, since we're diagnosing this, just one more sentence. I think human beings have always been lonely. And this is why they've constructed heavens and places where they'll be with the right people, maybe in the next life or somewhere, but that our loneliness has constructed our mythologies. And we've always been that. And I think the cell phone, which is immediate contact, is giving us a symptom of just how deeply we want that. And we'll use anything to try to get it, but there are no substitutes. So we have to figure out a way that we can have community in which we can touch and smell and see eye contact and see the eye flicker and the chin quiver and the smile somehow. And I've been challenged on that recently by a group of therapists who are trying to put an Imago course online. And I'm open to new data because I'm challenging myself with this. I said, well, that'll be fine. You can teach people dialogue, obviously on Zoom, put them in different rooms, and one's in South Africa, one's in Vienna, and the other one is facilitating it in America. And they can learn the dialogue, mirror, validate, and be empathic. But it will be difficult for them to evoke affect. And they proved me wrong. They had people in 3 different spots of the world, thousands of miles apart, in separate Zoom rooms, and they facilitated the dialogue. And you remember this, that you've been in the workshop. And when they got to, and when I feel that, it reminds me. And this person went into a childhood memory, broke into paroxysms of tears, and the facilitating therapist. Can say, stay with that. And the person in Africa on Zoom mirrored back the pain of that. And they worked it through just as if they were in the office.
Just showing you that emotions move at the speed of light.
Emotions move at the speed of light. And if we use technology correctly,
right,
we can, in fact, have personal experiences without being present. And I got that now, and I'm excited about it because we're going to start building digital models of safe conversation. Because now I'm convinced that we can do something with that, and we don't have to have face-to-face. We can, but we have to set it up in such a way that people can actually meet digitally, not just watch.
Right.
Well, you probably have a partner in JJ in trying to help that set up that technology bridge for you.
Well, we'll talk.
in spreading the word, of course. I mean, I when I started my podcast and I sort of broke it into different shows, my most popular show is, and I'm sure you guys experience this way more and have longer than I have, because I'm only a newbie in the sort of stepping into a space where I get fan letters every week telling me how much my work has changed their lives, how their show has improved their relationships, how they've gotten better jobs, they feel better in their bodies, they don't need their therapists anymore, and or whatever. And so it's one of those, but it's all through technology, even though we're not connecting. But then that is why I do technology groups online, but I also do live events. And so because even though it feels really nice for me to have that interaction and to have that feedback, and I do work with people on Zoom all over the world, one-on-one, but I have live events. Is that why you guys are still doing live events, for that sort of the tangible rush, if you will, of connection with people that are doing your work? Or are you just so excited about, and passionate about your work that you can't sit still, that you have to go and do events? Because someone might say, well, hey, you guys have been doing this for so long. Why not just like relax where you are and let everybody else do the work? What's your passion behind continuing to do the work you're doing in the way you're doing it?
I'll give my answer to the question. Harville's a powerful speaker, and it's a gift. And he's an orator. And I think he and I both love him having audiences to speak to, because it just feels good to him.
Perfect.
And it's beautiful. And probably he gets something back, but he really he loves delivering the content.
And you guys both do it. Helen, you do it extremely well also. I enjoyed the weekend with you and having you right by Harville's side and having Harville by your side, just watching the connection between the two of you and how you played very well together. So well done for both of you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there are two orators here.
I really love needlepoint. I love needlepoint. Research. I mean, etymologies, and like I love. So I'm sort of more introverted when it comes to the public. But we really loved seeing you with JJ also. The duality. It was beautiful, and the energy between the two of you. So felt the same. Watching. And both of you are good speakers.
Well, and I think Helen's comment is that part of it is that I started this in 79. The first workshop was in 1979. So and it's always worked, and it's still working after more than 35 years. The workshop works. 40 to 80 people come every time. And so it's kind of fun. And I guess I'm too lazy to think about how would you have 200 people on Zoom, and what would be the technological complexities of, I mean, I don't want to work with just one or two couples. I don't do that anymore. But if I could have a global workshop on Zoom, I would do that. I just don't know how to do it.
It's almost like you could do a hub location and have your facilitators all around the world. I think we had talked about that day, that one of the days of our retreat, where you said that this day, we have X amount of other workshops going on, and it's almost like to have you run it and be those facilitators. You'd still have to go somewhere and do something, though.
But you could do it with 10 couples and stream it. And then there'd be couples connected all over the world. There'd be ways to do it, I'm sure, and maybe could do it even on Zoom. Anyway, if you all are technologically sophisticated,
we are.
You can make a proposal about how that goes. I wouldn't mind not traveling anymore. Every time I go through security, I'm aware of how paranoid our culture is, and it's really amplified at the airport. So I get scared. Are we really in danger? Are we going to die on the way to the plane? And that's not a good thought to have. And those stern faces that look at you like, are you a criminal? Every time, and like four times, since we travel twice a month, it's 4 to 6 times a month we have to go. I could give up all of that if I could find another way to do this. But thank you for asking. Yeah, we love to do it. And I know, Helen, you don't seem to yearn for the stage, but you really well on the stage.
No, but I have something to say.
Yes,
you
you
know,
do.
Yes.
I definitely have thoughts on healing the relationship between, especially couples. Yeah. It's what I was born to do, to contribute to something like this. And that's why I proposed to Harville.
And you do it with such poignancy and grace and humor and warmth that people relax. They relax quicker for you than for me. For me, I'm like a fire hose. And somebody said, you're kind of like a fire hose. It's like too much coming at us at once. But Helen is very, very graceful deliverer of that. So thank you. I haven't thought much about that, but it's just we will do it and keep doing it.
Well, like I said to you last year when you and I had our first interview and you said you were doing something, I was like, I will be there because I know the opportunities are going to be less and less. And it was time. I mean, it was time. And I've been promoting your work for a very long time and I've had experience with it, but now I have had even more experience with it and will continue to, and want to continue to share what you're passionate about and the changes that you're making in the world. And it won't happen on today's show, but I'd love to do another one with you guys about safe
conversations.
Safe conversations, right? Because that is one of the, I think, best, if I had to say what I think is like one of the best besides the couples dialogue provides safe conversations. And I think that's why people are texting and not talking to each other, because we don't know how to have safe conversations, because we're always trying to think about what we're going to say next, or taking our position, or do that power struggle that you talk about in relationship. It happens in all relationships. So I think it really is part of our movement for peace in the world, as well as in any relationship, is to learn to have safe conversations. So it goes beyond the couple, it goes beyond the relationships. And I would love to talk more about that. But for today,
let's do that at some point. So I'd love to have a full hour on that. We could help people understand we need to change certain things in the culture, and that we can do that, we think, by changing micro things in relationships can change the whole culture. So that'd be fun to do if you want to do that.
Oh, I absolutely want to do it. It needs its own time because today, like the first conversation you and I had, we talked about imago therapy, but Helen wasn't here. And now I want, when Helen's here, and I went, Doug this was his first experience with it. And I just want to continue to promote the Getting Love That You Want. Everyone should go out and buy that book. It's the most up-to-date version, as well as I just want what would you tell the person, the skeptic listening? Let's say that there's a couple. I've done therapy. I've had enough of therapy. I don't want to be made to feel wrong, or it scares me to think about these things and I don't want to do it. What would you tell either one of those people to encourage them to try imago therapy?
Yeah. Well, I have two answers to that question. But JJ, could I first go back and say one thing about safe conversations?
Absolutely.
I'll just do it now, because anyone on the, as a prep to the time we'll be talking specifically about it for an hour. This is Valentine's month. It's the month of love, and Relationships First is the organization that Harville and I created to distribute safe conversations. It's basically imago therapy, but without the therapy part. It just has little tiny bits of imago therapy. But this month, we're announcing, I think today or tomorrow on the website, that anyone can download Harville and I teaching safe conversations to any couple. And I think, is it free?
It's
I can't remember.
It'll be free until the 15th. Then you have to buy it.
15th of February or 15th of March?
February.
I think it's February.
I don't know.
So we have 24 hours. It's the 13th right now, guys.
Okay, it might be, I don't know, but then it's not very much to buy. It's not very much, and my guess is it's longer. But anyway, it's if anyone's interested in the idea of just helping it enhance the way you talk, but not dealing with a real serious issue with someone, that you might want to check out the website. But to answer your question, as it can be a serious issue, when one of you says, our relationship needs help, we got to get help, and the other person has already given up. Like they're so discouraged, they don't even want to try because they've been there, done that, and it's just not working. But they don't want a divorce either. But like they're miserable, and they don't want help. And so that's the question, right? So there are two things to do. One is to begin to model what you know would create a healthier relationship, which is first a commitment, no shame, blame, or criticism of your partner. And when you talk with them, use a kind tone of voice and a kind look in your eye. Even if it's about a problem that you're having, like, oh, you've left the lid off the toothpaste for the, that's an issue with us. And if you don't mind, I'd really appreciate you put the lid back on the toothpaste.
With a smile.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
a kind
I mean, you can deal with issues, but let your partner know that you're trying, even if they're not. And maybe like get your partner a flower every other day or a piece of chocolate, and just go wherever they're sitting and go, honey, here's a flower. I hope your day is going okay. And then just walk out and don't expect anything back.
I like this idea. This is a great idea.
Well, you have to start acting worse for her to do that.
Oh, no, I don't want to do that.
Do you see all my flowers in the back? All my flowers?
Okay, JJ's been a problem, but you're trying to get her line. Okay.
Yeah.
Thing is, if you're wanting it, if you as one person in the relationship wants the relationship to get healthier and your partner isn't so interested, Valentine's Day is coming up. Ask, as a Valentine's gift this year, could we go to a workshop of one of the marriage people who are giving workshops in the country? Or our house of worship this weekend, or in 3 weeks, is doing something for couples as a gift to me for Valentine's Day, or a gift to me for my birthday, or a gift to me if you're a woman for Mother's Day, or a gift to me for if you're a father for Father's Day. Could we get away and just think about us? And because I want to learn what I could be doing better. I'd really like to go to a workshop because I want to know my part and help create a healthier relationship with you.
Yeah.
That sounds perfect. Harville, before you start, Doug has to run and do his own interview for his own show. I just want to be able to have him.
It's not going to be anywhere near as cool as this one, though.
But I want him to be able to say his goodbyes. I want to continue. I want you to finish your sentence and help me promote Imago. So is there anything you want to say before?
I just want to let you know that I respect the work that you've done. I love the work that you've done. I've loved that it's come through the love of my life here to introduce me to your therapy. And the retreat was amazing. And your staff is great. Rita and the entire team of counselors and facilitators were wonderful at SLN. And everything was so great. I can't gush enough about how much I appreciate everything that you did with your team to put everything together. So thank you. I apologize. I have to go. I had a prearranged interview myself with a CEO of a big company, and he'd probably get really mad at me if I just skipped it out on it. So I'll let JJ handle the rest of this. I know that you're in good hands with JJ.
And maybe we'll invite Doug back next time if we're all going to do Safe Conversations.
That would be wonderful. Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, honey.
Thank you.
Okay. So Harville, now let's have you answer the question of leave off where Helen stopped.
Well, I think we're all going at one, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's about 3 more minutes.
Yeah, I know. I just want you to close it so that way I have both of your words of wisdom and inspiration for others to consider doing this work.
The only thing I would add to what Helen said is to underline 3 times the last thing. Be sure that you say, I want to go and learn what I can do to be a better partner for you, instead of I want you to go and learn what you can do to be a better partner for me, because that second one never works. even if they go, they're pissed
Right.
and are resentful and won't learn anything because they've been dragged there. Unless you do something, we always side with them, the draggees, that they're going to get more out of it than the dragger did, because they'll learn that they co-created the problem. But if you're at home wanting to motivate, that what Helen said, to be sure that it's going with me and watch and be a part of me learning something so that I can be a better partner for you. We find that works nearly every time.
Good.
It's,
I have nothing to add.
yeah,
Okay.
all I have
Well,
to add to that.
again, for the last time, and tell me if there's anything I'm missing. I want everyone to go to harvilleandhelen.com, HarvilleandHelen.com. That's where you're going to find where they're going to be. And then in terms of, if let's say they're looking for an Imago therapist near them, what's the website for that?
HarvilleandHelen.com has links to IRI or ImagoRelationships.org, where you can click and get therapists. In fact, I think if you click therapist on our site, it will connect you to the therapy site, and we have therapists in 53 countries, so you'll find somebody nearby.
Okay. And I also would recommend too getting the workbook as well as the book, because even if you wanted to start doing some things on your own, they're wonderful resources that I think are very powerful. So, all right. I look forward to having you guys back on to talk about safe conversations. I think it's a well needed thing to promote to everyone, so that way we can really start to make a big difference in how everyone feels, how everyone relates, how everyone lives, and to, you know, bring down violence, to increase connection. And of course, when everyone's connected and feels good, everything's working. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you soon.
We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Happy
Bye-bye.
Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you too.
I
Thank
love
you.
your red shirt and ear whatevers.
Yes.
And all my flowers, I have about 6 dozen flowers around the house. Valentine's Day is my favorite holiday. So I buy flowers for myself too. And I do things for myself. I think it's a great day to have an excuse to celebrate yourself and your partner and just the idea of love.
Yes. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thank you.